Guitarist Tom Dempsey is a celebrated figure in the New York jazz scene, renowned for his hard-swinging sophistication, distinctive voice, and pure musicality. Having performed and recording with jazz legends like George Coleman, Kenny Barron, and Roy Haynes, his artistry spans decades of collaborations and accolades. With recordings as a leader, performances at top jazz festivals and venues worldwide, and a deep commitment to education and composition, he continues to leave an incredible mark on jazz music. His innovative style and versatility have also graced television, radio, and Broadway, making him a true force in contemporary jazz. So, Tom, good to see you today.
Great to see you too, Abe. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. Tom, the way I came across your music originally was a while ago. So when I first discovered Grant Green, I kind of did a little bit of a deep dive and started wanting to hear some of the tunes that he recorded, and then came across you playing one of his songs with Tim Ferguson, Minor League.
Oh yeah, yeah. That was a fun record. Yeah, and one of my favorite tunes. It's actually I believe it's a Duke
Duke
Pearson tune.
Pearson, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So, your work has been inspiring for so many people, and the educational content you have out is truly amazing. So what drew you to jazz originally, and like, can we just learn a little bit about your earlier influences when you decided you were gonna commit yourself to this music?
Yeah. So there were a couple of factors at play. I mean, as long as I can remember, I wanted to play guitar. My first kind of exposure to guitar was a television show called Hee Haw, and also I had a cousin of my mother's who played guitar, and he would play at some family gatherings. So I always knew that I wanted to play guitar. I had toy guitars as a kid. Couldn't really find anybody who would teach me until I was about 8 years old. But I grew up in a town in I call it upstate New York. People would call it Western New York, but it's called Binghamton, New York. And in that town, there were really well, there were a few different influences that were going on at the time. A legendary bassist named Slam Stewart actually ended up retiring in Binghamton. He and his wife lived there. And what Slam would do a lot of times is he would do these assemblies in the schools. So he would come to our elementary school and do these concerts a couple times a year. And, to me, he was like the cool guy who had the song Flatfoot Floogie and would come and we would sing it and he would play, but he would bring these really great musicians into the school. So that was kind of my first real exposure to jazz.
So it wasn't just like a one and done assembly. This was like several trips that he was making.
Oh, this was all throughout all through even up into high school.
That's so cool.
And he would start, I mean, I have these memories of him coming to do these concerts in the gymnasium at Thomas Jefferson Elementary School on the west side of Binghamton. And he would bring these local musicians who later I learned were all, amazing musicians in their own right. So that was going on. And then I was also really fortunate to grow up with a number of great musicians as friends, many of whom have gone on and are doing amazing things. So there was right down the street from me was the trombonist Steve Davis,
Oh, wow.
who, yeah, he like literally lived a block and a half away from me. Tony Cadlick, great trumpet player, lived a few blocks away from me too. Dina DeRose, great pianist and singer, she lived on the south side of Binghamton. Chris Jensen, amazing tenor saxophonist, who was in the last iteration of Dickie Betts' band. He was also on the south side. John Hollenbeck, great drummer and composer. We were really, really good friends.
Did you run
And
into Rich Mullin at all? Or is
Rich
that,
Mull,
yeah,
I don't know. I don't believe so. That was the one missing link that we had, is we didn't have a regular bass player.
no, the only I asked that
Um,
because I think he was teaching at Binghamton or still is at one point. That's if, I think so. I could be wrong though, but that there were a lot of musicians who were around.
Yeah. So I had this, core group of friends, and other musicians too. Reese Taylor, great trombonist, and then other a guitarist named Tim Schumacher, really great too. A little bit older than me, but we were all, kind of running in the same circles. And Steve's father had this amazing record collection, still does, and so, there was always kind of music around, and Steve would be constantly hipping us to different things from his dad's collection. So we had that going on. We also had a strong scene at the university through a gentleman named Al Ham. And there was also a club in Binghamton called the Music Box that they would even let us play, during the week. So we would have a place to play. So it was a very kind of, for a small town in upstate New York, there was a real kind of fertile ground to be exposed to jazz. And a lot of jazz was coming through because of, these people who were, kind of fueling the scene, if you will.
So it sounds to me like when you got to go play at this club when you were younger, it was just like you said it like it was just a fun thing you guys got to do. It didn't like it was not like a high pressure gig situation. It was just a place to kind of explore what you guys were doing.
Yes, essentially. However, the gentleman that we were oftentimes playing with was a guy named Doug Beardsley, who was a great pianist. And Doug was very supportive of us, but he would also tell us, when we're kind of not doing things right. Um, but he exposed me to a lot of the great things too, and so I mean, I was really fortunate to kind of grow up in that environment.
That's amazing. I mean, you've had so many moments over your career. I mean, for anyone who's listening out there, you really have to go do a deep dive, into Tom's website, because there are so many incredible endorsements by people like Jim Hall, and there's not much more than to say than that. When we're learning how to play this music, like there are things that shape us, and there are milestones, like whether they're certain gigs or certain relationships we have, mentorships, experiences. Like, can you talk to us about some things that without those things not happening, you wouldn't be the musician you are today?
Well, I've had some great. I've had the opportunity to study and be around some really great musicians. My guitar teacher growing up, Phil Hayes, was really an amazing teacher and amazing guitar player, still is. And he, really had this way of organizing every lesson that was just really, it matched my personality very well, and really helpful and supportive. Um, when
How
I was
how
in
long
college,
did you study with him for?
that's a good question. I'm going to say about 3 or 4 years. And then I studied with a couple of his proteges, but by that time I was getting ready to also to move on to go to college. And when I was in college, I studied with Ted Dunbar. And the you know one of the I mean, besides Ted's musicianship, and one of the things that really drew me to Ted was that I was kind of aware of certain guitar players who were maybe the next my generation or the next generation just ahead of me. And a lot of them studied with Ted. And I was like, well, if they all studied with Ted, then maybe I should see if I can do that.
Well, I
And
know
so I was,
Pete Bernstein studied with Ted. I was just talking to John Harrington. He studied with Ted
yeah,
for a bit as well. So,
yeah,
he taught a lot of, very special musicians.
yeah. And like Phil, Ted had a very organized teaching approach. So that really kind of resonated with me. And, he was really like a mentor to me. I also studied with Rodney Jones, who kind of took me in like little bit of showed me another kind of direction to go, and really helped with a lot of different things. But as far as kind of playing experiences, one of the things that really was pivotal for me is when right around the first time when I first got to New York, I basically started playing in a lot of the kind of organ trio bands.
What year was that? I'm sorry, just so we're just, what
Yeah,
around what time was that?
so I arrived in New York September of 1991. I remember it very well. And shortly after, kind of finding my way in New York, I started working with a number of different organ trio bands up in Harlem. And the great thing about these gigs was that you were playing a lot of blues, and you were playing a lot of, and you were playing a lot too. Like the gigs wouldn't necessarily pay very well, but you were playing a lot, and you were, like the gig might start at, 9 o'clock at night and end at 4 in the morning. And, there were many gigs where I, saw the sunrise as I was coming home.
You saw sunrise.
So, but playing that much blues and playing with so many different musicians in that circuit was really great, and that's where I got a chance to play a couple of times with Jack McDuff, and it was just amazing to experience that, and have that really become kind of foundational in my playing, in my music.
Well, I've heard people talk about Jack McDuff guitar players when they got to play with him, he would really kind of kick their butt.
I have to say, he was the couple of times I played with him. He was. I wouldn't say he was, you know, overly like congratulating me or anything else like that. But he was fine with me. He was good. I wasn't intimidating. I mean,
Yeah,
it was
I mean, when you
intimidating
play
by
with
a
him,
lot.
like, I kind of feel like, I mean, was it like almost like he was like he's just one of these people, like always in that state of like jazz organ genius. You know what I mean? Like, it's just
Oh
he's
yeah, yeah. I mean,
always that way.
right. And for me, there was kind of this, you know, I've listened to him on records for years and years and years and years, and here I am, like getting the chance to play with him. I mean, it was kind of out of body. But that's kind of the way it's been with a lot of great musicians that I've had a chance to play with, or teach with, or just be around. So that was really important. And then I think just, there was a scene in when I first got to New York around this club called Augie's, which is now Smoke. And to be around that, when I first moved to New York, I actually lived right around the corner from it. So I got to go there quite a bit. And
Upper West Side.
the
Yeah.
West Side, yeah. And played there a bunch. And, being in that sort of fertile ground too was really, really important, I think, to my playing.
Yeah. So you really, you were in New York. It's such a important part. I mean, people talk about New York in the 1960s, but the 90s are just as important when you're in the year 2025,
Yeah, who would have thought? But you're exactly right.
because the music is still so young. I'd like to talk to you a little bit about performing, if that's okay. Obviously, it's a very rewarding thing, when the gig's going well and the magic's happening on the bandstand. Can you talk a little bit about things when it comes to performing? Are there certain things you find challenging still at this point in your career, or is it just kind of feel like home? Like, let's say you're playing with your group and just doing your music. Like, what's something that you need to kind of think about that might be a little bit hard for that to do the music you love? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, there's always in one of the challenging things these days, and I was just talking about it with another musician friend of mine on a gig this past weekend, is that, unfortunately, we've kind of gotten to a point with music where it's hard to keep a band working consistently. And when, one of the things that was great about, going back to some of those organ trio gigs I was talking about, is that we were playing so much together that you really kind of developed a certain band sound. So, you know, with some of my groups that I'm involved with now, the one of the challenging things is to, when we're just kind of working with new compositions and just getting them to sound fresh and sound like, we're not reading them. So that can sometimes be challenging. But I've also, I think as you get older, I'm kind of noticing the sign on your back wall, be kind to your mind.
I think that's what we have to live by that, but easier said than done.
Yeah, and I think, I know for me, as I've gotten a little bit older and a little more experience, that getting to that point is a little bit easier. And I think it's a really important thing to be aware of because I'm ultimately trying to get to the point where I'm not thinking at when I'm playing. So I think that sometimes that can be a little bit of a struggle, but you know sometimes whether it's because of travel or because of other kinds of things, sometimes maybe you don't have the opportunity to connect with your instrument, you know, as much as you might at other times. So sometimes you might be going out on a gig and you haven't, been able to practice as much, or you've done a lot of travel and you haven't been able to play as much. And so sometimes, getting that connection with the instrument can be challenging. But, I think it's in those moments when you can get to a point where you're just saying, all right, so this is today, and this is how I'm going to play today. And, tomorrow, God willing, it'll be a different day and, there'll be another experience. So just, trying to stay in that space is, I think, can be helpful.
Well, so you're saying that it's easier to be in that space as you've gotten older and
Yes.
you know, so I would assume that when you were younger, it was, you were probably a little bit more self-critical, would that be the correct term to use?
Yeah. Well, I think I'm probably equally as self-critical as I was back then, but I think I have other tools kind of in my toolbox to be a little bit kinder, to be self-critical and still be kind to yourself. So,
Sure, sure. Um,
yeah.
you know, uh, when it comes to improvisation, it's like you're saying you want to get to the point where you're not thinking, and you're just doing it, creating the music, and that's the only thing that you're focused on. When you have those moments when you're thinking too much, what can you tell us about getting out of those spaces? Do you have to tell yourself like anything, or is it just maybe pay attention to the other musicians more? Like, how do you come out of that space when you're thinking too much, you think?
For me, the best way to do it is to really become much more aware of what I'm hearing, what the music that I'm hearing in my own head, the music that I'm hearing that's around me, really connecting, with this moment that, you know, you're interacting, you're having this conversation with other musicians and speaking this language that you share in common. So for me, it's really kind of deepening my listening and really being aware of that allows me to kind of quiet the mind a little bit more.
Hmm. Yeah, it's something this is something that artists struggle with all the time.
Oh yeah, I'm not saying I've mastered it, believe me, but everything is a work in progress. But I mean, but that's like what's so cool about this is that, I mean, the guitar, every single day I learn something new about it. And, how many things in life can we say that about? And to be able to have a life where I'm learning every day and growing every day and, being in that space is really, you know, I'm really grateful for it.
Yeah. And I know you were mentioning before that you wish that those opportunities to perform every night at the rate you did when you were, coming up, where it was almost an every night thing, just playing the blues and stuff. Uh, it, it, I don't know if those opportunities exist really anymore in the same way.
Yeah, I don't think that they really do. I mean, you can go through certain stretches, but uh, I try to recreate it as best as I can, kind of in my own world. I mean, this became really true when the pandemic hit, and one of my biggest fears was that, I'd worked all these years on learning all of this repertoire and these songs, and would get reinforced on gigs, and all of a sudden I didn't have gigs. And so I was like, well, I'm not going out to a gig, but I can make the gig like here. So I would, basically put together set lists of songs and make sure like I went through all those songs every
That's
single day.
awesome.
And that practice has more or less continued, you know, um, through today. And I think that was kind of an important lesson to take from that.
That's great. No, Tom, this has been such a great conversation and so informative. And I love the stuff you said about um, when you just created your own performance opportunities. Like, it's not there, but you're going to act like there is a gig anyway. That's a true artist right there who's not going to become complacent in what they're doing. So, just, want to say thank you so much for talking with me. And where can everybody find your website, social media, all that stuff?
Yeah, so my website is tomdempseymusic.com. Also tomdempsey.com. I don't use that as much as I should, but I'm hoping to maybe make it. I've had Tom Dempsey Music for so long, I haven't really made that shift. But also Tom Dempsey Music for Instagram and Facebook, and uh, yeah.
Beautiful. No, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Abe. It was really great to talk with you. I really
My
appreciate it.
pleasure.